Hi there, my name is Mrs. Mason, Head of Teaching and Learning, and this video has been prepared all about parents' roles in supporting their child in revising for their upcoming mock exams, or indeed, when it comes to the time, their real exams. We've put this together for those parents that were unable to make our parent forum on revision. Parent feedback from that was really positive, and we're really keen to share all of that information with all of our parents, even those that were unable to make that, or of course for any parents that wanted to recap anything that we covered on the evening. So I hope by the end of this video you will be very clear in how you are best able to support your child as they prepare for those very, very important mock exams. So what we covered in the evening was just to make parents a little bit more aware of what it's like studying now in comparison to perhaps some of us when we were younger in school studying, but most importantly to share lots of resources, let you know what role the school takes, make sure that you are super clear in how you can best support your child and the things that you can do to make sure that they can be successful. Things about revision is understanding why we need to do it and why it's so important. Traditionally, some of us may have been quite tempted to cram at the end of our session of revision and hope for the best on the day, but we are very, very clear these days through lots of research into education that revision is absolutely crucially done over time with lots of revisiting, and that is because of the curve you can see here called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So what you can see here is that when we first learn something or first come into contact with a piece of information, we very quickly forget about that, and what we're trying to do by revising and revisiting learning that we have previously revisited is to overcome how quickly we forget that. We forget less and less each time we revisit the same piece of information. That's why revision needs to be repetitive, and it's why students need to go back over topics that they perhaps think they know lots about and feel quite secure on. When they actually test themselves and find out what they know, we often only know 20% of what we think we know. That is quite a scary thing to think about when if we're overestimating how confident we are in what we think we know. So testing is a really crucial, important part of revision, and I will talk some more later in this video about how we're providing opportunities for students to test themselves and really check whether they know what they think they know about certain topics. So the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve tells us why it's so crucial for students to revise and revise often and revisit topics. The other reason revision is so important in this particular day and age is because, unlike many traditional qualifications, or old-fashioned, I suppose, qualifications, there's very little or even no coursework in most of our subjects. That means that student knowledge is tested on those final exams, and if they can't perform on the day, they simply won't do very well. That means that that kind of revision has to be started now. We can't wait until much closer to those real exams for students to decide to revise. They simply won't be able to cover all of the topics and won't be able to revise in enough depth and often enough to commit that knowledge to memory. And where we don't have the luxury of completing coursework tasks, and we are going to rely on our performance in a final exam, that is very, very important. So teaching and learning methods have changed lots over time, and things might seem quite unfamiliar to you. As a parent myself, for example, some of the maths teaching methods are very different from the ones that I experienced as a child, and yet I still want to be able to support my children and sometimes feel at odds about what the best way to do that is. However, just because what's happening in classrooms and the way children are taught now is possibly different to your own experience, it doesn't mean that you aren't able to support them. You just need to know where to find the right answers. So one of the biggest changes to current revision methods and suggestions that we make is for students to make use of the absolute raft of technology they have at their fingertips. So unlike people of my era who would have spent hours looking at revision notes and highlighting things, having to refer to textbooks and going back over written information, for lots of students who don't particularly like to revise in that way, there are all sorts of alternatives out there. And as a parent, it's very satisfying to see a child looking at notes and reading something, and it looks good that they are doing those things, when in actual fact it might be just as successful and just as rewarding for them to be revising in a way that seems less familiar to us. So for example, if students are choosing to record things in PowerPoint or Google Slides, if they're choosing to record them in Word, there's nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't have to be that they are writing their notes. They do absolutely have to be deciding what needs to go in the notes, so it's really important that they're not copying and pasting information from places. The act itself of choosing what to put into a revision resource is what's helps the information to stick for us. So it's very important that they are deciding what goes into the resource that they're making. However, it's not necessarily important that they handwrite it. And there are tools such as Dictate and Read Aloud in our Microsoft Office, if you go into Word, that can take some of the heavy lifting out of that for students who struggle with reading and writing. The other thing that is absolutely phenomenal these days is how many different revision platforms are out there for students to access. And again, where students might feel stuck about what to revise or what sort of topics to look at, some of those decisions can be made for them almost by some of the technology that we have at our fingertips. GCSE Pod is an absolutely excellent resource for all of our GCSE subjects that have an exam at the end. It consists of lots of very short bite-sized videos with lots of quizzing and checking of understanding. The check and challenge in particular in GCSE Pod is excellent, and all students have been shown how to access this. They might also choose to be using Sparks Maths. They can choose to do additional tasks on Sparks Maths, not just what their teachers have set for them. And some students prefer Maths Genie, which is a free platform which is similar but doesn't ask them to chart lots of book codes, which some students say they prefer. Seneca is another free revision platform that will quiz them on all sorts of areas, so it can check for them. It will pose questions about the correct topic information that they will be tested upon, and it will provide the answers for them. It's all self-marking as well. So it's a great way for students, any of those platforms are a great way for students to take their revision in whatever direction they want it to go, choose which topics they think they need to work on, and test themselves on that and learn sections of knowledge. The other thing we absolutely recommend here at King Arthur's is the Adapt app. Now this is not a revision platform, it is a revision scheduling or timetabling app. Adapt app is free, so you can all download that. Every child has been encouraged to download the app onto their phone, and what it will do is you program in the subjects that you take, tell it which exam boards you use, and it will then suggest every day, it will suggest you should do some revision on this particular topic now. The student rates how well they did and how secure they feel, and then it will schedule it back in. So it will then say they did really well at this particular topic, we don't need to revisit that for several weeks. They didn't do so well at this topic, let's schedule that in to revisit again fairly soon. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that one of the most important things we want to get across to parents is how they can support their child. We're providing students with lots of information about what to revise, how to revise, when to revise, but for parents it's really important that you know what we expect of children, what they should be doing, and what are the best ways for you to help them to do it. So here are some really top tips from the GCSE Pod website. I have also suggested to parents they might want to sign up to GCSE Pod and visit one of their webinars. They have some excellent information on there about how parents can support their children with really good revision methods and habits. On here, number one then is to start as early as you can, and students should have already started their revision, definitely. If you know that they haven't, please as a parent make sure that they are now starting to regularly revise. They also need a plan, so the Adapt app is a fantastic way to do this. We've also provided students with paper copies of revision timetables so that they can make themselves a plan. If they share the plan with you, that's absolutely ideal. Stick it on the fridge, make sure it's nice and visible so that you can check in with them and say, you should be doing this now, how have you gotten on with that now? It doesn't need to be you nagging them, hopefully, all the time, but it does require for you to try to keep them on track, and if you know the plan, then that's really important. They also need a study space, and this is really important that someone has, that students have a quiet space to work in, somewhere they can really concentrate, and that might require from you as a parent that you suggest a better space than one perhaps they quite like to work in. Maybe the kitchen table isn't so great because there's lots of distractions going on around them. Maybe actually it would be better if they went and worked in a quieter area of the house. Those distractions are a huge temptation for students. So as a parent, please do say no mobile phone while you're revising, or no music if you think that's a distraction, or no telly. Try to encourage those distractions to be out of the way, and they can then be a bit of a reward. Once they've completed 20 minutes of revision, yeah, have your phone back and go back on your whatever it is you're fancying doing. They need to mix it up as well. So that's one of the things that's good for you to know, is to see that different ways of revising, different topics, revisiting different things is a really healthy way to revise. They shouldn't sit and plough for 3 hours through a history piece of revision. They do need to mix it up and change things around. Regular breaks are also really important. So we know that our brains simply cannot function at that higher level with those levels of concentration for hours at a time or anything. So obviously regular little breaks are really important as part of that as well. One of the suggestions on here is to revise with a friend, and although students think this is not a very cool thing to do, it is actually much nicer way to revise is to have some company doing it. For some of our students at King Arthur's, that's not necessarily very easy geographically. If they live out in villages and things, they might not necessarily be able to physically go and meet up. So we have suggested that why not do that over some of the other platforms, whether they want to FaceTime each other to do it. It's a good idea for you to keep an eye on that as a parent, so that you can make sure that they are genuinely revising, but it can be a really good way for students to feel more motivated to do some revision. On here is about using past papers, and these are essential for students because they are authentically worded questions that will be exactly like they're going to come across in those real exams. So we supply those as a school. You don't need to source them. Please don't feel like you need to go digging around for resources. By the end of this video, you will see we have prepared all sorts of things for students to make that really easy for them to know what they can do to revise, and for you to know as well. And their last bit of advice on here is about eating healthily. I would add in about sleep in here as well, and rest and relaxation. So it's really important that students, for their brains to fully function and work well, that they've got that balanced diet and they've had a good night's rest and a good night's sleep. Walks and fresh air are really important, lots of daylight, to make sure that they are fully able to immerse themselves in that revision when they get back to it. So one of the things that students and parents often say to me is they just don't know, they feel really overwhelmed, and they feel like this, like they're just thinking, help me now, I don't know where to begin. Sometimes it's because people are not sure what to revise, sometimes it's what should I actually do, sometimes it's that they're not sure how much or how often, or they literally just don't know where to begin because they feel like they've got so many things they need to learn. Sometimes as well, students and parents say to me that there's lots of friction at home because parents' idea or students' idea of how much to revise or when they should start is a bit different, and sometimes that can cause arguments or cause difficulties. Now, we really don't want that. It needs to be, we want students and parents and school all working together. So that's part of why we've put this video together, to make sure that people are really clear. So government recommendations about how much children should revise are 1 to 2 hours a day after their school day, 2 to 3 hours a day when it's not a school day, so either at weekends or in school holidays. Perfect time then for me to share the message that 2 to 3 hours a day over the half term is about the right amount of a revision. Now, some students look at me in absolute shock horror at that and gasp, but realistically that is what students are doing up and down our country, and that's roughly the right amount. Please don't allow students to revise for 8 to 9 hours a day. It's just not healthy. They won't be able to remember things necessarily. It's overload. So 2 to 3 hours is about the right amount. And it is important that students take a bit of a break and have some fun over their holidays as well as just revise. So if you have got a student who's quite anxious and wants to do loads and loads and loads of revision, part of your task is to say, that's enough now. You've done a really good job, well done. In terms of what to revise and how, we have provided students with lots of information, and there's a PowerPoint coming out to yourselves and to students, has already gone to students, apologies, in their Google Classroom about how they might go about that with very specific revision tasks. So I'll talk more about that in a second. As a parent then, the single biggest difference you can make to their success is to take an interest in what it is that they're doing. Please ask them lots of questions. What is it that you're studying? How much have you managed to complete? Oh, what's that you're doing there? Do you want to tell me about it? How did you get on when you did in your last assessment? All of those questions, so that you are taking an interest and you know how they're getting on and are getting a sense of how they're doing with that revision. Checking in, like how's it going, is really important. However, checking on, they do need some checking up on probably. Have they stuck to that plan we put on the fridge? Are they on track? If they're struggling, what can they do? You know, what might they do differently? Which platform might they try? If they're finding something overwhelming, leave it and come back to it. Maybe that's one to park for now. Ask the teacher when we're back in school about it, ask for some different resources, or maybe, like I say, try a different platform. If what they're not understanding what is being told to them in Sparks Maths, maybe try Maths Genie. All those little videos they publish are really, really useful and are slightly different, so it might offer a different perspective. So offer your help, but you don't need to know lots of things. You don't need to know all the answers, all the methods that students need. That's our job here at the school, and their job as students to know where to find the answers, which methods to use, any of those things. What you can do is offer some support in terms of your time, resources, if they need more flashcards, if they need some highlighters, if they need a lift across to their friend's house so they can do some revision together, and maybe some healthy snacks as well that are going to keep them going, give them a little boost. So don't feel as a parent that you need to know anything about the respiratory system or chemical ionic bonds or things that you can't remember from your own GCSEs. You don't need to know that. You just need to know where to point them. And that's part of what our forum and this video is about, is saying, suggest GCSE Pod, suggest that they put it all into Adapt so that they get a timetable that reminds them when to do it, so that instead of you having to panic along with your child about what to do next, that those things are in place for them. In terms of what students should actually do then, it is really important that students don't fall into the pattern of rereading. So this is a piece of research that has been done and redone again, actually, over the best revision methods and how to make sure that learning sticks and that things stay in our long-term memory. And it's very tempting for students to read and reread and go back over things. However, it's been very much proven that this just does not effectively help them to remember information. Highlighting is slightly better because they're having to select which information is the key information, so that's helping it stick a little bit. But by far the best methods of revision are for students to explain something to someone else and to do some practice testing. So those are the things that you should prioritise if you're asking your child, sorry, not your student, asking your child about the revision they're doing. It's also very, very tempting for students to revise the things that they know well. So it's very rewarding to test ourselves on something, get 100% of the answers and go, brilliant, I'm nailing this. And so go do some more revision on the same thing. However, if we already know it and we're already getting 100%, we're revising the wrong thing. So please, again, if they're doing exceptionally well at some of these tests, suggest a different topic or suggest a different subject and say, actually, you weren't doing so well at such and such yesterday. Why don't you take another look at that? And so those are two of my top tips of ways of push them away from just reading and highlighting. Suggest, is there a test you can do? Do you want to write some quiz questions and I'll test you on them tomorrow? All of those things, or get them to explain it to you. I haven't ever studied that, or I don't know anything about that, or I can't remember that very well from when I studied it. Can you tell me about it? And students having to tell you is a really good way for them to find out what they know and also help it to stick in that long-term memory. In terms of school then, we have already started supporting children with all of their revision. So lots of interventions have already started and in place. We've got revision sessions coming up where students will do walking, talking mocks. They've already had lots of things on revision techniques and different versions they can use. I've also put together some extra bits in the revision PowerPoint for their half term. PPE preparation tasks then are already underway, and so students have already begun to complete these, ready for those November mocks. There are only 31 weeks left before students sit their final exams. So that sounds like quite a lot, but it will absolutely fly and vanish. And so what happens in school is literally only half the story. That revision and the home learning they're completing is the other half that's going to lead them to success. So I mentioned the PPE preparation tasks. Hopefully your children have already talked to you about these and they have already been completing them. There are 5 weeks of tasks altogether. So we've had week 1 and week 2 will start after the half term. Has been set this week, due in after the half term. For the half term then, we've put together a menu of revision tasks. So I'm going to share what that looks like a little bit for you. And these are all of these resources and suggested tasks have been put together specifically for these PPEs. So we have set the questions for these PPEs. We know, unlike the real exams at the end, we know what will be in them, and so we are guiding their revision. So if they take our advice and complete the task set, they will be in a strong position to really show us what they can do and what they know in those exams. Here's an example page then from the English literature of the revision tasks. So on each of these, if students click into any of the images there, they will be taken to GCSE Pod and they will be able to do the check and challenge quiz questions there. If they're unsure about those quiz questions, they can go back. It will take them back into the pod so they can watch some videos to help basically plug any gaps in their knowledge. So if they find that they really don't know a lot about Ozymandias and they aren't able to answer the questions, they will take them to some videos that teach them about Ozymandias, and then they can have another go at the quiz questions afterwards. On each subject, there are compulsory revision tasks that they all must complete, and then additional optional revision tasks there that are suggestions for students that want to do that little bit extra. So please do encourage them to complete all of those compulsory tasks. Please suggest, oh, absolutely, you're doing really well at that. Perhaps you might want to do some of these optional ones as well. Encourage them to get up to that 2 to 3 hours a day. In terms of GCSE Pod, I will just reiterate to all parents, they do not need a login. So students have all got a login. They don't need to remember their password. They can log in through either Microsoft, so that when they go to the login page of GCSE Pod, it says it will bring up, put in your username and password, or do you want to log in with Gmail? Do you want to log in with Microsoft? And they can log in with either of those and don't need to remember any passwords. So if they're stuck getting into that site, then you as a parent can remind them they can just log in that way. The other thing I've put into their revision PowerPoint are just some useful advice and tools on there. So again, these are all hyperlinked. We're trying to remove any barriers for students. They just need to click on the link or scan the QR code and they will go straight to the revision resource that we're suggesting might be useful. I've also put the revision clock, so that's one tactic they might choose to use, where the link underneath will take them to a video that tells them exactly how to use a revision clock or how to complete one. Same with the blurting, and I've put in the PowerPoint some templates that they could use if they want to do that as well, and they don't want to make their own. So we really are trying to make sure that students don't have to think too hard about what to do, how to do it, any of those things. It's all at their fingertips, and all they need to do is commit to it and have a go. After school revision timetable then has been shared with parents, but if you were unclear, then I've just included that here as well. So these are after school revision sessions that are taught sessions by teachers, and we're encouraging students to attend as many of those as they want to and need to. Some students we will be saying really should attend or must attend some of these if they are really far behind in their learning and need to get caught up. So I hope this short video has been useful and that you have been able to have all your questions answered and get some top tips about how you support your child. It's really important that school, child and parent are all working together for the success of our students. So if you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to drop me an email. All of the PPE prep tasks are on the website along with the revision PowerPoint, and there are also in the letter where this video link will be a link to the PowerPoint as well, so that you as a parent are empowered to be able to support your child. Thank you very much in advance, and I hope they enjoy their revision.